of the Northern Virginia and DC chapter of CHAD. I just wanted to welcome you tonight. I'm going to turn this over to our treasurer, Cheryl Gedzelman, who's going to do the introduction.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our March lecture. I'm Cheryl Gedzelman, treasurer of CHAD of Northern Virginia and Washington, DC. Tonight, we're pleased to have Judy Bass from Bass Educational Services present Fostering Independence and Self-Advocacy. It's never too early or too late, and hope that you will continue to join us to hear future lectures in this series. Our chapter, CHAD of Northern Virginia and DC, is one of the many chapters of the CHAD National Organization, and as such aligns with the national mission of improving the lives of those affected by ADHD. We're a volunteer organization of trained professionals who offer support in a number of ways. In addition to offering this free monthly lecture series on the second Tuesday evening of most months, we also have support groups for parents, students, and adults, as well as a yearly resource fair to highlight ADHD Awareness Month. While we're all volunteers, we cover other expenses through membership dues, donations, and sponsorship. If you believe in our cause and have the funds, we urge you to become a member if you are not already one. Now I'd like to introduce Judith S. Bass. She is a certified educational planner and an internationally recognized expert in the field of college and post-secondary placement for students who learn differently. For the past 20+ years, Judy has provided comprehensive planning services for students who learn differently, including those with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. Judy is a contributing author in the recently published book, Navigating the Transition from High School to College for Students with Disabilities. Her articles have appeared in numerous magazines, including Washington Parents and Attention Magazine. Welcome, Judy.
Judy, thank you very much for inviting me to speak here tonight. So I would like to start by going over what we're going to discuss tonight in a little bit of detail. And as you can see on the screen, we're going to talk about developmental stages. We're going to discuss what practical life skills are and what it means to have functional independence. And then how does all of that lead to college readiness? So if you think about college, if you think about the essential skills that children need to develop, think about the fact that we're in the pandemic right now, we're all at home, and we have time to work on some of these skills where students feel safe and secure and where they can learn some of those essential skills that they're going to need later in life. At the same time, develop some self-confidence, some independence, and eventually some self-advocacy. So I like this cartoon because it's a really good interpretation of what I'm talking about. For anyone who has more than one child, you know that they all have their own individual personalities. They all have different needs at different times, and they all grow and change on their own schedule. Before my career as a certified educational planner, I was an accredited Montessori teacher, and many of the techniques that I use in my practice today come from my experience and knowledge of the developmental stages of a child. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about developmental stages. And children learn to function by exploring and experiencing their world. Toddlers learn through their senses. They are concrete learners. They watch how something is done, and then they do it over and over again. They want to do everything themselves, even things that they can't do. But the experience of trial and error is so important at this age because the toddler is learning how things work. Then you look at elementary age children and they want to think for themselves. By third or fourth grade, they're beginning to start abstracting, and they understand abstract thinking and more effective problem solving. And then when we get to adolescence, to middle school and high school, students start out at that push and pull stage. They want to be away from their parents. They want that social independence one day, and then the next day they crawl into your lap and want a hug. And it's a very push and pull stage, as I said. And then their peers become their whole world, and they take a while, but then they kind of swing back by the time they're in high school, and they are more apt to be part of the family again. So thinking of these developmental stages, of course, not every family and not every child is going to fit into this category. It all happens at different times, but these are general time frames. But the overriding message is that children learn to function independently when they're given the space and the opportunity to learn those skills that they need to gain a sense of independence. And it gives them a way to learn throughout their lives. So if you look at this little girl here, she is learning how to tie her shoes. And she is excited that she's able to do it. She's learning that she can be independent. And by functioning independently, she functions independently because she's developing these skills. And the quote I like from Maria Montessori is, "Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed." Sorry, is there a problem with the?
You're good now.
Oh, okay, sorry. So this little 6-year-old girl is learning, she's excited, she has learned to tie her shoes. But what happens when the next day, it happens with all of us, we get busy, we're having to rush out of the house, and we don't have time for her to tie her shoes. We just have to get out of the house. So if we say to her, okay, I got to tie your shoes, we got to get out of the house. What's the message? The message to her is, I can't do this myself. I need someone to do it for me. Now, hopefully it's just that one day and she goes back to being able to tie her shoes again. The point is, though, that children feel really good about being independent. They like a sense of responsibility. They like feeling like they're being productive. So some of the practical life skills, if you think about it, when you have a toddler, let your toddler feed himself, no matter how messy it is, because that's going to give him that sense of being able to do it himself. Think about if you didn't let the toddler feed himself at 4 or 5 years old, you probably would still be feeding him because he let you. You know, it was like, okay, I don't have to do this for myself. So teaching children to do things for themselves has long-lasting positive consequences. For some parents, and I'm one of those, it's hard to let go because you think you're supposed to be doing those parenting things that, you know, you're supposed to take control and you're supposed to do everything. So letting them do things for themselves is really benefiting everyone. And letting go of your parental responsibilities is, in a sense, being the parent that's going to help your child develop into independence. So if your child is in elementary school, like I said earlier, he likes to do things for himself. He wants to do his way of thinking, and it may not be the same as yours. Another skill could be cooking. Teaching your middle school child maybe how to make simple foods like boil water or make scrambled eggs. Again, that sense of accomplishment. Think about how that child will feel when she's able to make a meal like a breakfast or a dinner for the whole family, and feel really accomplished about doing that. Another example is doing laundry. One good thing about being home right now is that we can get a load of laundry washed, dried, folded, and put away all in one day because we're home. So at every age, children can help. Even the youngest child can help you put laundry in the washing machine or in the dryer. I know my grandson, who's 4, loves to do that, and will help when he can and feels really good about helping. And to him, it's like a gift in a way to feel productive. Okay. So this is one of my favorite cartoons. As we're talking about being able to let children be independent, here we're trying to take over ourselves because we know we can do a better job than our children. And as I said, I've done it too. I have my 2 daughters were very independent, and then by the time they got to middle school, suddenly they wanted me to do everything for them. And I thought, great, they want me, they need me. And I kind of got sucked in. And fortunately, my son came along later where he got the benefit of my education, and I had him be independent from an early age and didn't do things for him. So one thing that when a child's able to count on themselves and they gain a sense of control, they learn to trust themselves. And that's really important, that they can trust their instincts and trust their own decision making. And that comes from trial and error. That comes from being allowed to do that. If you think about a baby who's standing up for the first time and you get nervous, then the baby gets nervous. But if you just put a whole bunch of pillows behind the baby, the worst that can happen is he falls and he learns to get back up. But no one is creating a sense of fear for him trying things. So that's just an example for, a very young baby. So when we talk about this functional independence, how does that help the student? So developing a sense of purpose and self-motivation. Again, that toddler who's feeding himself, he needs to eat, he's hungry, so he can feed himself. Okay, that is motivating. Okay, my son loved to play basketball in middle school and came to me one day and said, can you teach me how to wash my uniform? And I said, of course. I taught him how to wash his uniform. I showed him how everything worked. And then I said, now you know how to do your laundry, because all your laundry is washed the same way. And from that point on, he was able to do his laundry. Developing confidence that they'll carry all their lives. The little girl who is tying her shoe, or the girl who is cooking a meal for her family. They have confidence in their abilities. And the more confident they are, the more they can carry that with them all their lives. And then also building self-sufficiency and self-esteem. And we know that for children and young adults with ADHD, their self-esteem can be really, really low if they've been in an environment like a school that they just don't fit or isn't working for them, or they just hear all the time things like, you're so smart, why didn't you get this done? Why didn't you get that done? And they know they're capable. They don't really understand why things aren't happening. But when you give them things that they can do, find something they enjoy, and then they're motivated to do it and they can feel good about it. So build on the successes so that the child can feel good about what she's capable of doing. And then all of this leads to taking responsibility for their learning, which is all kinds of learning, not just academic. But if you have a child who isn't afraid to take a risk and who isn't afraid to try something, then they're going to push themselves a little more. If you have a child who's afraid to take that risk, we know a lot of students are perfectionists out of maybe their anxieties, but teaching them that it's okay to make a mistake or it's okay to try again. And that leads to taking responsibility for their learning, because when they hit a roadblock in school, sometimes they just quit because they don't know what to do. Here they can learn, if they've been developing this throughout their lives, they have a sense of what their capabilities are. And they're more able to push through and develop that resilience that they need. So all of those skills lead us to self-advocacy. And how do we foster self-advocacy? Well, here are 3 different examples. And something you might not ever have thought about is when a parent takes a child to the doctor because she's not feeling well. And the doctor says, "How are you feeling?" Who's the one that answers? The parent. We all do it as parents. Oh, she has a fever, she has this, she has that. Why not let the child talk? You can always supplement what the child says. You can always talk in addition, but give your child a voice. It's a really great way to teach self-advocacy because the doctor is going to respond to your child and she's going to get more comfortable talking to adults in a meaningful way. And of course, with you there, you can also support that. Another example is this little girl who's ordering in a restaurant. It gives kids a lot of sense of empowerment to look at a menu, order something, and have it brought to them. And it reminds me of my granddaughter, who when she was 4, we were in a Chinese restaurant, and we're sitting around talking, and all of a sudden we hear, excuse me, excuse me. So we all look up, and my granddaughter had called over the waitress and said, "Can I have some chopsticks, please?" So she felt perfectly comfortable doing that. And that's the kind of thing that's the kind of self-advocacy that you can foster. You know, yes, it's hard. It's not an easy thing to do all the time. It's not something in the front of our minds, but think about that phrase of never helping a child do something that they believe they can do themselves. So even if they can't end up doing it, if they try and fail, if they ask you for help, then you can help them. But as much as it's difficult to let it go, they learn more by doing it themselves. And in my practice, a lot of times I am talking to parents about doing things at the child's pace, not necessarily at the parent's pace. Sometimes I have parents who want to summarize the session, and I can see their child who has been sitting for 45 minutes or an hour with ADHD and just is checked out completely. And the mom wants the child to listen while she repeats everything. And I'll usually say, you know what, I think that's enough for today. If Charlie, if you want to go outside, go ahead, I'll talk to your mom. And give him that chance to leave, but also educate the parent that you're a detail-oriented person. And I get that because I am too. Your child is not. He's on overload. He's heard all he can hear today. And sometimes you have to think about that, what they're capable of doing. So if you look at the high school student here, this is a good example of a teen advocating for himself. If he's talking to his teacher and asking for help, that's wonderful. How do you get there? When your child's in middle school, it's really helpful if your child, for example, attends an IEP meeting. And by high school, you would want your child to be speaking up in the IEP or the 504 meetings and say, this is what works for me. This is what helps me. In addition, I know that we all want to know all the grades, and with everything online and all the grades being posted, as parents, we're always looking to see how things are going. And we're going to jump and say, oh, we've got to get in touch with the teacher, something's missing. I heard from a coach earlier today about her client's school had things that were missing that really weren't missing listed because they were doing them in class. And the parents were panicking and saying, you're missing work, you're missing work. Why not have the student be in touch with the teacher? And if you need to send an email, why not craft the email with your child and say, let's do this together. You ask the teacher, or you go in and talk to the teacher. We can role play what you're going to say, but you try talking to the teacher first. If you're not successful, then I can come in and talk with you and see if we can get it resolved. But always give that child the opportunity to try first and to get an explanation before even asking, before even going into the school. And what are positive outcomes of this? When you give people positive, when you give the children choices, but limited choices, you're giving them an opportunity to pick and choose what they can do. Remember, mom and dad don't need to do everything. And you're giving them the opportunity to feel good about what they're doing, to pick things that they enjoy, and to make that either a routine or vary it by each week, or each child does something different. But it can be a family project to do something together. And again, the younger children really benefit from having this opportunity to do what they can. There is someone in the community, some of you may know and may have heard this story, who says to her children, the younger ones, when they want to do something, I'm really sorry, but the laundry, you can't really do the laundry till you're 7. Your sister's able to do the laundry, but you're only 4. So when you're 7, you'll be able to do the laundry. And the anticipation of being so grown up that the student can do the laundry at 7, and she can't wait. Think about when your child's ready to drive, how much they want to get that license and permit so they can drive. Well, that can work for a lot of things. So keep that in mind, that find things that are appropriate for your child, age appropriate, and also at their socio-emotional development for them. Okay. So by high school age, we really want to make sure that our teenagers have these essential life skills, because if they are not prepared for college in their life skills, it doesn't matter if they have really, really good grades. They have to be able to wake themselves up in the morning. They have to know how to manage their money. Are they spenders? Are they savers? Do they impulsively buy things? And what about cooking? Again, teaching them how to cook very simple things is very important. Medications is a very important piece, because when children go off to college, there is no nurse giving them medications and there's no parent giving them medications. And it's very important that they not only know what they're taking and what the dosage is, but they need to know why they're taking it. And this is important because I had a student once who was taking ADHD meds. And as is often the case, I see this many, many times, students go off to college and say, I don't need my medicine anymore. I just needed it because everybody thought I did. I don't need it. I'm going to go to college and I'm going to start over and not use it. Well, this particular child was also taking other medication, not just ADHD. And it happened to be an antidepressant that you can't really go off cold turkey. However, he didn't know that. So he had a lot of emotional issues and depression. And the parents really didn't understand what was going on at first. I also feel that it's important for children to know the names of their medications and dosage, because if they're ever in a situation where, God forbid, they have to go to a hospital or they're in an accident or something, the hospital's going to want to know, what are you taking, how much? And that can be very critical. And laundry, we've talked about. You know, again, it's that sense of knowing you can do it for yourself. I always ask my students when I meet with them, are you able to do the laundry? Can you cook? Can you get yourself up in the morning? These are the essential skills that allow you to succeed when you leave home, not just your academic piece. So when we talk about college readiness, we're talking about not just academic ability, but emotional regulation and social skills. And so when we talk about what we're looking for in college, unfortunately, our society puts a lot of pressure on students to focus on academics. And that's why the pressure is on the parents to make sure their students get good grades, because good grades lead to good colleges. The truth is, a student with straight A's who has no life skills is not likely to be successful. But a student who has B's, and maybe even some C's, who is very independent, resilient, knows how to work hard, gets his homework done, has a better chance of success in the right environment. And so what I think is really important to talk to parents about is to think of this three-legged stool and think about what happens if one leg is missing. There's need to be equally in place for a student to be successful. Now, development is there's to be equally independent, especially with kids with ADHD. They might have very strong academic ability, but their social skills or their emotional regulation might be lagging behind. So for that reason, sometimes we think about maybe the child isn't ready to go off to college. Maybe we need to work on some of those things more. And maybe you think about taking a year off to develop more independence and develop more self-advocacy. And that can be done outside an academic setting. So there are a lot of things that you can do to balance these, but to make sure that your child has the long-term view of starting out being independent and building on that independence throughout their life, and making sure that you as a parent can allow this flower to blossom, basically. Okay. All right, so I will take some questions, and we can start there, and then I can fill in with any other comments or questions anyone has. No questions.
There are, someone has their hand up.
Okay. Oh, we didn't talk about putting things in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay. Sonia?
Sonia?
Yeah, I have a question. These all seem a little generic, and I think one has to remember really to be keenly aware of what works for your child, and particularly with ADHD kids who can be behind socially and emotionally by 2 to 3 years, but they catch up. And to push them to do some of this stuff before they're ready, I think is harmful. And I'll give you an example. My son's a senior in high school. He's going to go to college. And ever since freshman year, the entire staff at his high school has been pushing me to make him come and be a part of the IEP meetings. My son's anxiety level would be so high in those meetings because those meetings are often contentious. that it would set him back emotionally enormously. And I had to fight them tooth and nail to say, no, he's not going to be in here. You have to trust me on this.
Okay.
And he's never been in. And now all of them understand why because finally this year, although he hasn't been in them and we're in virtual learning, he's advocating for himself a lot. And it just took 2 or 3 more years of maturation. Had we forced him to do it when he wasn't ready, it would have been a disaster.
I
So
agree.
I
Thank
think
you for bringing that.
so. But say this, I hear this all the time. Oh, by high school you have to do this, or by this you have to do this. Well, not if you're not ready. And if you're not ready, then maybe you'll be ready in a couple of years. It's okay.
Thank you.
They will get there. They will get there. Anyway, comment.
Thank you. I don't know if you were on in the beginning when we were talking about
Oh,
the fact
I
that
must have missed it. I'm sorry.
at their own pace, and
Yeah.
that we should never push children to do anything when they're not ready. The whole idea is to develop this at things that they're interested in and things that they do at their own pace so that they are feeling strong and they are feeling comfortable. This is a good example here. Everybody blooms differently. Some people are slower and some people are fast. The child's pace, and we need to give the child successes and only do things that they can do, that they're capable of doing. And I agree with you. I would never push a student to do anything he's not capable of. So when I say that this is what they need to be ready for college, it doesn't mean that they should be forced to do it. What it means is they may not be ready to start college right away. So if a child isn't advocating for himself, maybe he's not ready for college, which is okay. I tell my students that all the time. So the whole point of this is that everybody moves at their own pace. But the more you give them opportunities to be independent when they're little, like tying their shoes or emptying the dishes from the dishwasher or putting the laundry in, things that they can do, that's what builds on their successes. That's what allows them to feel more confident. And I will tell you though, in EP meetings, I have recommended that the student come in for the first 5 minutes and explain what he or she needs, if they're comfortable doing that, and say, this is what works for me. And I've mentioned it to parents that you can role play, you can practice what you're going to say. If it works for your son, it might not have worked anyway, but have them come in, say, this is what helps me, this is what's worked for me, and then they leave. And then the rest of the meeting, they don't have to be there.
I would say
But it's
most of the time, the student does not know what works for them. And that's part of the problem in the IEP meetings, is that it hasn't made it clear what works for them.
Right. And that's why parents can help with talking it through. Okay, there's another question in the chat.
So the question is, how do you recommend we determine which colleges are best fit for our ADHD students? My senior has been admitted to quite a few schools, tech schools, liberal arts schools, state schools, all have the comp sci game design focus that he wants. Without school visits, this is almost impossible.
Okay, the first thing you need to do is find out if they offer executive function coaching at the college. Many colleges now will do that. You need to ask if the person doing it is a professional. You don't want peers, not peer mentors. That's not going to work. Is it someone on staff? Is it someone that the student can see regularly, like at least once a week? And can they see the same person? If you get a no to most of those, it's probably not going to work unless you hire an outside executive function coach. So the best thing is to research the disability services at the schools and find out what they do have. Another thing, I have a program called College Web LD, which we have made free during the pandemic. It's college, Jackie can put it in the chat, collegewebld.com. And I have a star system. We don't have a lot of colleges. We have 400 colleges in there, but you can look at some of the colleges that are known for helping kids with dyslexia or ADHD or autism, and I have a star system that you can look at to see if I think this is a really good school for someone with ADHD or not. So that's another way to do it. But the main way to do it is really ask the school, know what your child needs, and make sure the school can provide it.
Okay, we have another question. I have a middle schooler who is academically successful, but struggles with social skills. I'd love to help her catch up, but she's resistant to joining a social skills group or taking a class. And I just lost my place as I push down. Hold on. Okay.
Kathy,
Any suggestions?
Mhm.
Any
Does it say how
suggestions
old
on
she
how
is?
she can help her?
Okay. How old is she? Do we know?
Middle school.
Middle school. Okay. So the social skills piece is a challenge, especially at the middle school age. And I used to teach middle school in a private school. So I know that it's a really, really difficult stage. You know, one thing is to find one friend, and you know, she doesn't have to be the kind of person that has lots and lots of friends, but if she has one friend, maybe a family friend, and you do things together, that's one way to kind of bridge that. Therapy is another way. You know, if she doesn't want to go to a group, maybe the one-on-one therapy at first, because once she becomes comfortable with the therapist, you know, I've got this group of girls that is meeting, maybe you would like to join. But depending on, you know, the ADHD, social anxiety piece, sometimes it's just going to be there. You know, it doesn't go away. And educating your daughter about it. For example, some kids get very impulsive, or they start talking a lot, and they can't end a conversation. They just keep talking. They don't read the cues. You know, that's really a challenge. So I don't have an actual answer for it, but you know, keeping in small groups is usually helpful in terms of that.
So we have someone who wants to know, Judy, their son is a senior and absolutely wants to go to college. All of his friends are doing it. They're really trying to encourage a gap year. They don't think he's ready. They're wondering how, largely because of self-advocacy issues, would they go about trying to have that greater conversation with him?
Well, it is difficult at this stage as a senior, of course. But I usually tell parents that if you feel really strongly that your child is not going to succeed, the worst thing that you can do is send them, because if they come away as seemingly a failure, if they crash and burn, that is more devastating than you telling them no, they can't go. And so that's something for the parent. And what I would say about the student is think about their development as they were growing up and how they interacted with friends, how much they do on their own, and just make them aware of what college is like, how much they have to do on their own. Sometimes you really can't get through to that, but sometimes you just have to say, we don't feel comfortable being you this year unless you do X, Y, and Z. So maybe there's a summer program. There are lots of summer programs that work on college readiness and executive functioning. But the other option is to look for a program that can develop executive function skills. You could consider a community college, although I don't think that that's a helpful solution. But again, it's a very difficult decision, but it's worth those skills that they thought they had to say no.
True. At this point, we don't have other questions in the chat. If anybody else has a question that please do so.
All right, I'm going to talk a little more about some of this fostering independence piece. If you think about, I mentioned some of this earlier, if you think about a child who wants something, children start out with intrinsic motivation. They enjoy learning, discovering. And unfortunately, in our public school system, at least, we tend to have more passive learning. And so that intrinsic love of learning can disappear in some children who just do what they're told, and they do the homework because they're told to do it, but that love of doing it has gotten lost. So it's really great if you can find something your child loves to do. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, but everybody has a strength or two or three. Why not tap into whatever your child's strength is? Unfortunately, in schools, we tend to focus on and reward linguistic strengths. If you're a good writer, you're a good reader, that means you're a good student. What about the athlete? And what about the artist? And what about the thinker, the deep thinker? If you can help your child see what they're really good at and promote that, you know, let's do some artwork together. Let's hang up all your artwork. Let's keep a portfolio. Let's go play the piano. I love listening to you. I remember, I love music, and I remember playing the clarinet in 4th grade, and my mother making me play out in the backyard because I was terrible and I made squeaky noises and it was bothering my brother who was trying to sleep. I still remember that, as I wish that I had gotten more encouragement to play more musical instruments because I love them, but I don't really have an advanced skill. The opposite could have been true. No matter how bad I played, if my parents sat and listened to me play, I might have gotten better. I might have had more confidence. So, you know, another area is for the students to start to understand their strengths. I can tell you, every time I talk to a student in my office and I ask them, what are you good at? They don't know. They can tell me all the things they can't do. And those of you that know Jonathan Mooney, he's been on this thing lately about strength-based IEPs. Why do we have weakness-based IEPs? Why don't we write strength-based IEPs? Why aren't we focusing on what the children can do and teaching them through those ways? So there's a lot of things about independence that are tied in to education too. But it comes from these practical life skills as a young child that give you the foundation. And if you continue to love learning, the school setting isn't going to change that. So a lot of my ADHD students, almost all of them, when I ask them this question, I get the same answer. Do you love learning? And then they don't say anything, and I pause. I go, I mean outside of school. And then they go, oh yes, I watch YouTube videos. It used to be I watched History Channel. I watched Discovery. I watch the medical shows in school because they're so distracted or it's too overwhelming, but they love learning, a lot of them. So tap into that. You know, you might have a child who doesn't want to play baseball but wants to go to a museum because he's very fascinated with dinosaurs. You can strengthen that by buying him books on it and by doing that. And I'm sure many of you do those things. I'm just pointing out that this session on fostering independence leading to self-advocacy can take many forms. And as Sonia said earlier, of course, we cannot force children to do things they're not ready for, but we can encourage them to do things that they enjoy. So, any other questions or comments?
Can I add something? So I'm Jackie Vincent, Director of K-12 Services for BASS. And I think Judy hit on this point, and was it Sonia also? One of the most important things is to also help your kids understand what works for them. So it's not just that they don't know what works for them, but a lot of times when we're working with students with ADHD, or my daughter is in 4th grade, they'll some questions, some inventories, so that they can start to understand how they learn. And that gives them the words they need to be a self-advocate, right? So part of it is giving them that experience and asking them, like, do you like to study with the light on or the light off? Does that, do you need to be in a really quiet environment? Those kinds of things, I would say earlier the better, that they know that about themselves, especially with ADHD. It helps. My daughter, for example, does crafts during online school, and her teacher said it doesn't interrupt her learning. That's fine, but like, that's what she needs, is something to do with her hands. But she knows that and can say that. So I think any way you can help them understand how they learn best is also a really good way to lead to self-advocacy.
Thank you for adding that, Jackie, because we do some surveys with our students, and they're very simple surveys, and I'm sure you can find some online that do this. It asks questions to the students like, do you like bright lights? Do you get bothered by bright lights? Do you like to eat when you're sitting around studying? Do you like to lounge on the floor or sit up in a chair? And it gives you a profile. And the student understands, oh, I get sleepy when it's too warm. I need the room to be cooler. I like to sit up in a straight chair, so it doesn't work if I'm laying on my bed to study. Bright lights really bother me. I usually work in a dim light or shadowy light. That works better for me. I need music. And that's a big one, that parents who need silence don't recognize that their children need music to function. So Jackie's right, there are lots of ways to find this out. And it reminded me of a student I was meeting with last summer who is a water polo goalie, okay, a very unique athletic position. And we were doing an evaluation together. We were sitting and talking, and I had him do an assessment. And he has severe dyslexia, so his dad said, I'll read the questions to you. And he said, okay. And he stood up, and the dad started asking him the questions. And I look over because his answers are so much more fluid, and I saw that he was bouncing a ball. So here's an athlete whose strength as a goalie is quick reflexes. He thinks best when he's moving. He needs to move to activate his brain. Okay, think about that. How does your child learn best? What's the situation? My son used to drive me nuts when he would bounce the basketball against the wall while we were studying. But then I finally realized he couldn't just sit at the table and look at me and get anything done. But sometimes you think about it, you have better conversations with your children when they're actively doing something. How many of us know that our children have to draw or fidget to pay attention to something, like Jackie was saying? So again, knowing, helping your child understand what works for them also leads to that self-advocacy. I need quiet, or I get bothered by the students in the class when we're taking a test and they're all talking because they finished, things like that. So again, the more you can start early, the better. And I know a lot of you are already high school parents, so that's why I say it's never too late, because you can always teach better independence and advocacy. I have students who have no skills and go off to life skills programs and spend a year or two learning some of those things, learning how to advocate, but they have to be away from home to kind of have a fresh start as an adult to get some of these things accomplished. So yeah, so that's another piece of that.
We have one more question, Judy.
Sure.
It says, I find it very tricky to support my ADHD child who struggles to learn from the same mistake when it comes to functional independence. He gets so frustrated with needing corrections and prompting that he often avoids attempting tasks. Any suggestions?
Yes, I have a 4-year-old grandson who's like that already. And if something's too hard, he just won't do it. And what I have found works is for me to say, can you show me how it's done and let me try it? And then I do whatever the activity is. And I might be silly about it depending on the child's age and mess up a couple of times. and then do it correctly. Or I might say, put your hand on mine and let's do it together. And it's almost like a breakthrough, that making it fun and not a chore can help. But with ADHD kids, they don't always learn. They don't know the consequences. And sometimes you have to walk them through the consequences, such as teaching an ADHD child to drive is not an easy thing. You probably all have done that. Teaching them to say, look in the mirror, what do you see behind you? Look 3 cars ahead, what color is that car? You're literally training them to see these things. Well, if you have a young child in the house and you say to your middle schooler, if you leave the basement door open, what might happen? Oh, wow, my brother might fall down the stairs. Right. That, by articulating it, that allows them to remember they better close that door sometimes. So it depends on the child, but I think that demonstrating it and showing them that you can do it, doing it with them, but the neutral part, it's like, it's okay, we'll do it again later. There's no judgment. That's the hard part. They feel judged, even if you're not judging them, because they know they're their own worst enemy, really. I tell parents all the time, your child doesn't need to be reminded that he forgot to hand something in. He knows he didn't hand it in. One reminder is enough. You're not going to be able to get him to do it. He has to do it himself. So again, it depends on the age. Any other questions or comments? Any other areas that we can cover?
We don't have any other questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there might be one. Somebody has said, my husband and I, probably for your website, Judy, my husband and I just tried registering and it's not working. Should they contact you personally?
Yes, that's fine. Oh no, it's not working. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So I guess thank you all for coming. And if you have any additional questions, there's another question. Is there a good book to help kids figure out their strengths and college career choices? Yes, there are some good books for that. Again, it depends. What I really find is that instead of looking at career choices at this age, looking at your strengths and the type of things you enjoy doing are a better way to think about what you should do in college. You can say, oh, this looks cool, I want to be an engineer. But if you're not really you don't have the kind of brain to be an engineer, you're going to change your major after you get to college anyway. So what I like to think of is having students do like strengths inventories. And there are lots of sites online you can go to find that. There is a site for careers, a government website, and it's escaping me now, the name of it, but you can go on and it gives you all these careers. I will get it for you, and I'll send it in to Cheryl. It'll come to me. But it's a website that you can go on and say, okay, I'm going to look up an electrical engineer, and then you can click on it, and then you can look, what are some other careers like that? And then it tells you the activities you would do as a career, what kind of skills you need to have that career. And so that can help students, start to formulate ideas. But I have students come to me all the time saying, I want to be this. And I'll say, well, that's interesting. I want to be in theater. Oh, well, tell me, what productions have you been in school? Oh, I haven't done any yet, but I want to do them in college. Or, I decided that I want to be an astrophysicist. Okay. Do you know what it takes to get there? Yeah, I'm just going to go to college and I'll take those courses. So, the career piece to me evolves. I tell students it's okay if you don't know what you want to do. Take courses you enjoy, and that will lead you in that direction. as long as you're at a college that has a variety of options for majors.
Is it the ONET career?
Yes,
I'll put it
ONET,
in the
thank
chat.
you. Thank you, ONET. That's exactly it. And like I said, go on and do career inventories, strengths-based training, strength-based assessments. Yeah. Okay.
Judy, there's a parent. Anyhow, any ideas for helping her children with time management, specifically morning routines, managing homework schedules? They're both really tricky.
How old is the child, does she say?
She did not say.
Okay. For young children, charts are great. They love
10
stars.
years old, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
10 years old, just got it from her.
Okay, so at 10 years old, you know, sometimes the motivation has to be short term. The reward, in a sense, has to be short term. So you could do, let's make a chart of 3 things and let's put it on your door. And every day when you do that, you get a star. It seems to work, but not with everybody, but it seems to work with children who have ADHD because it's an instant reward. They get to put a sticker on, or, you know, they get a token for something. And when they get a certain amount of tokens, they get something for it. They do need to have, the reward has to be positive. A negative consequence does not work with kids with ADHD, as many of you know. So it has to be more of the reward type. My daughter probably was in 5th and 6th grade and was still using a chart. You know, I woke myself up, I brushed my teeth, I washed my face, I packed my lunch, or I put it in my backpack, you know, and everything got a star. And it was this sense of accomplishment. And at the end of the day, maybe there's a treat. It isn't an easy task, but it takes time, and it's hard. I mean, there are coaches that will work with young children and work with families to figure it out. I think at 10 years old, it might be helpful if you want to hire somebody to help you learn how to manage the structure of the house rather than directly to the child at 10. But I think that the more organized you can be in the house, like if everything's got a place and it's in its place, that helps. But it's really developmental, and it's not an easy task. I don't know if there is a, you know, magic bullet for that.
So another parent piggybacked with, could you talk to us a little bit about time management and homework tracking for older high school and college students?
Sure. Executive function coaching is the best way to help students learn these skills. And it's not that the parents can't teach them. The parents aren't capable because they know what to do. It's the fact that it's the parent telling them what to do. If you have a good executive function coach, what they know to do is to help the child use a system that they like and that works for them, not to impose like, this is what you should do. You know, my son in high school said, I don't like binders. I want to use folders. And I tried to say, but folders, everything falls out of them. Binders are better. He goes, I like folders. And sure enough, that worked for him. He put everything in a folder and he was organized. So he would come home and take it out of the folder and put it in his desk or something. And it worked. It was his system. So what I would say is, if you can hire an executive function coach to work with your child, even for a short period of time, the coach will help them internalize those skills. It may take till college. There are some students that just are not ready to absorb that information. They're not mature enough. But it's something that has to be learned because it doesn't come. You know, the prefrontal cortex of the brain is not mature enough at that point in life. And it might take till they're 22 or 25 or 27 before they really internalize it. So giving them strategies to help is one thing. There are a lot of assistive technology tools out there. And if those of you that know Joan Green, she's an excellent resource. She's a speech and language pathologist, but she focuses on assistive technology and helping kids use it effectively. And she finds a lot of free programs out there for students. So that might be another option to look at assistive technology for ways to manage time with alarms and things like that. That's another way.
So we have a parent who asked, how do we find executive function coaching for a senior that's covered by insurance?
It's not something that would be covered by insurance unless you are seeing or you're meeting with someone who your child has a specific diagnosis, such as autism, for example, can get more services as a diagnosis than ADHD. But if you're seeing a speech and language pathologist, or you're seeing someone like a, what else might there be? There are certain professions that qualify for it, but you really, it really isn't a medical insurance companies really don't see that as a medical issue. So I don't know. I don't know any executive function coaches that do take insurance.
I was going to share one other thing in the chat. I'll just be putting the resources in the chat. Is when you're talking about assistive technology, is Curry College has this app wheel, and it's categorized by time management, scheduling, all that. It's a great tool, and you can click on it and it takes you right to the app. So they've sort of taken the best ones for each category for kids with ADHD and with executive function and put it on this wheel. So I'll put that in the chat.
And Judy, we have another question.
Great.
What do you recommend students do during that gap year, and why don't you recommend community college?
Okay. I'll start with the second half. Community college is a hit or miss situation, because if you have a child with ADHD who isn't able to function in high school, they're less likely to be able to function in college, where there's even less support. Again, unless you hire a coach to work with them. But community college has a lot of adjunct professors. You're not always going to be able to connect with your professor. You might feel intimidated, but you're not going to find the kind of support you need. And what I find happens is that students come out of community college thinking, I'm really a failure. I can't even do community college. When in fact, there are some four-year colleges with more support that you can be successful in, better than the four-year. But the first part, what do you do during a gap year? It depends on what you need. If you need social emotional growth, there are travel programs. I know but there's several travel programs that are for kids that have ADHD. There's programs in the summer that can develop those skills so they're ready for the fall. There are also life skills programs that students really need to skills to be independent, even for the living, staying home and to mature, and saving your money, knowing that you're going to have to use it for college.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the hybrid programs where they might partner with a community college, but they're also getting the living experience?
Sure. And I was going to talk first about Broad Futures, which is another program that is local to us in DC, that students have an internship and they go, it's a semester by semester, and that's a great way to spend your gap year. Is 4 days a week they're doing an internship, and there are interns all over the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area. 4 days a week they go to their internship, but they're getting lessons in how to be an employee, how to dress, how to write a resume. And on Fridays, I think there's a little more social activity going on, and they spend their time doing internships, and it's really helped a lot of students mature. Some of the adjunct programs, I think Jackie was mentioning, like college living experience, college internship program, that are standalone programs that you can go live in the program and then take courses in the community college where your support comes from the program rather than from the college. So that is one way, but that wouldn't be just going to community college. That would be going to a program that's going to help you gain independence. The name of which program? Mimi has a question. Broad Futures, yes. I'll type it in here. Broad Futures. Let me send that to everyone.
I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you. Yes, so that's a good example. There are internship programs where you live away. There's one called Dynamy up in Worcester, Massachusetts. That's an example where you're basically going to college in every way except for the college. But a lot of times, non-academic way, by having to take responsibility. If they're not at home, for example, they're more likely to be able to recognize that if they messed up, it's on them. They can't look at mom and dad and say, why didn't you wake me up? Why didn't you remind me? And they have to look around and go, I'm the only one here. I have myself to blame. You know, and sometimes that light bulb goes on and sometimes it doesn't. But being away from home makes it more likely that they're going to mature in that way. Any last questions? Anybody? Let's develop executive functioning skills for high schoolers. There are lots of programs around. Kathy, do you have any recommendations locally for some?
For executive function programs for high school kids?
Yeah.
God, there's a million of them. I do one. Many of the private schools do them. If you're looking for something in the city, let's see, Sidwell does some stuff.
So a lot of the schools, the private.
A lot of the schools do it. I have one. Social Grace has one for students who are high ASD and ADHD. I know that Olin does one with Educational Connections.
Okay. And also there are programs at colleges that work on executive function.
I was just going to say, and Landmark.
Landmark and Beacon College, right. They both have programs for juniors and seniors, rising juniors and seniors. And they work on those executive function skills. And Thea, do you have anything in that area for summer programming?
I mean, there's a lot of great camps. I mean, there's Summit Camp, which I work at. There's SOAR Camp. There's Camp Aquila. Round Lake Camp is a little bit more involved, but yeah, there's a plethora of good camps in this niche. Maybe you have some more that I'm blanking on.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's helpful. SOAR is one where it really helps the students develop that executive functioning because it's an empowerment, it's a confidence builder. And it, you know, again, it depends on the level of the child if they're ready to receive it. One thing about Landmark as a college is if your child is still resistant, Landmark is not a magic cure. They have to be willing to accept the help and learn. So, you know, again, but I think there are some online programs also. But Greg, if you have, if you want to know a little bit more about it, if you want to email us at the office, I can give you the names of some others that I just can't think of right now. You're welcome. All right, so anything All right, so, oh, what is available to students? There are available to students who don't have the funds to spend. There are group classes that are, like there are some companies that will have a class of doing it, like maybe 6 kids or 8 kids in the summer. That would certainly be more financially available. Focus Collegiate for college, yes, thank you, Jean, is an excellent executive function program that is out of Boston. The person who runs it started Mansfield Hall, those of you that might know Mansfield Hall up in Vermont, which is a standalone life skills program for students who are going to college. But he now has a program where he supports students at pretty much any college remotely. And it's not just that they're available during class time, but they can call their coach anytime for any problems, whether it's academic or not. So that is a good consideration. Okay. All right, well, if there aren't any other last minute questions, thank you again for coming to tonight's session.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. And if you have any questions, please send us an email or contact Judy directly.
Judy, you're getting lots of thank yous for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you. Okay, good. Anything? Okay.